With great power comes great responsibility.
Compromise where you can. Where you can't, don't. Even if everyone is telling you that something wrong is something right. Even if the whole world is telling you to move. It is your duty to plant yourself like a tree, look them in the eye and say no. You move.
Never step onto the battlefield of ideas unprepared. Before you enter the fray, you need a plan. And there's no better place to get one than right here on Tactics with host Caleb Colquitt. The Situation Room goes live now on News Radio 1440.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for being with us here on Tactics, where speech isn't violence, tolerance isn't love, and disagreement isn't hate. However you're joining us in the Situation Room this afternoon, we certainly do welcome you and thank you for making us a part of your day. As always on Wednesday, we try to still focus on the news, but take a little bit more existential approach to it. We try to focus on things of a more spiritual nature, and today is going to be no different. For those of you who may not know, yesterday was Holocaust Remembrance Day. And the reason that it was Holocaust Remembrance Day is because it is the anniversary of the day that the Americans and the other Allied forces helped liberate Auschwitz, the concentration camp. And every year when this day comes around, there are all kinds of disconcerting statistics that come out. One that really shocked me and bothered me is that there is a new survey that came out that roughly half of Americans don't even realize that 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust. They all kind of have a vague idea of what the Holocaust is, but they don't know how many people died. They don't understand a lot of the details around it, and that really is, unfortunately, a statement on us as a society and what a poor job we have done when it comes to remembering the Holocaust and teaching the lessons that we learned from that. The thing that really scares me about this is that when it comes to the slogan of the Holocaust, which is, of course, never again will we allow something like this to happen, the thing about never again is it only works if people remember what happened the first time. If you don't remember what happened the first time, and if you don't remember the stages, the signs that led up to that, it's pretty much impossible for you to make sure that it never happens again. Any event that you're trying to prevent, you would need to look at the past, look at the history, and understand what those warning signs are, and also understand exactly what happened, how it happened, what was the build up to that. If we forget that, if we lose our history, we are doomed to repeat it. Never again will not work if we do not know our history. And since this is primarily a local news show, there was something else that I wanted to bring up about this, that a local celebrity, at least here in the state of Alabama, the coach of the Auburn Tigers basketball team, who wound up going to the Final Four last year, Coach Bruce Pearl, is a Jewish man. And he was asked about this on Holocaust Remembrance Day the other day, and about some of his personal experience with that, and he gave in just 2 minutes what is, I can only qualify as a phenomenal answer that really does make you think about it. And another thing that I really appreciated about it is he not only praised America in general, but specifically the state of Alabama for some of their religious liberty and the way that they look at that, and really highlighted the fact, and I think it's appropriate on Holocaust Remembrance Day, to remember a lot of these rights that are afforded to us here in the United States, and specifically in the state of Alabama as well, are things that other places in the world just don't have. So this is Coach Pearl's Holocaust Day message.
Today's always been a difficult day for me, as it is Holocaust Remembrance Day. I was born in 1960, 15 years after we opened up the gates in Auschwitz and discovered the atrocities. And we vowed to never let that happen again to anyone. Anti-Semitism is a terrible thing. As a Jewish man, I've lived with it my whole life, and I've seen its ugly face many times, and that's why I'm so blessed to live in this country where there is great religious freedom. I can live here in Auburn and practice my faith. And the great challenge for me has always been that we are brothers. We are all brothers. We are all sisters. We are all related. Abraham had two sons, at least two sons, Isaac and Ishmael. That makes us brothers because we have the same father, Abraham the father of many nations. And Jesus was born a Jew, and he died a Jew. And that makes me brothers with my Christian brothers. And if we can focus on that, whether you agree with it or not, that's not my point. The point is we have a lot more in common than we have apart, and we should celebrate those. And we should never tolerate racism or something like anti-Semitism. And so what I would ask you all to remember, and never again.
So, Coach Pearl's statement there were several things that, and I thought he just absolutely hit the nail on the head in a very short amount of time. I'd like to just go through a couple of those things. First of all, one of the things that is sort of the core theme at the middle of that, and he's absolutely right, and I don't even know if Coach Pearl realizes how right he is. When it comes down to it, the way that we prevent something of this nature, the horrors that went on with not just the Jewish people, but the other people that were also in the concentration camps, because people forget that there were 11 million people that were killed in concentration camps total. There were 6 million that were killed that were Jewish, which means that there's a significant amount of people that were killed in those concentration camps that were not Jewish. And so, of course, the Jews unfortunately caught the brunt of it. But this wasn't just about hating the Jews. Certainly, that was a component of it. And it's not one that we should shy away from or be afraid to talk about. But there was more going on there when it came to Nazism. And Coach Pearl is wise to bring that up, because he's talking about that there is a brotherhood there between him and his Christian brothers and sisters and the human race as a whole. You see, this is something that a lot of people that are skeptics of the Bible or naysayers or whatever, they fail to realize or fail to mention when going through their history, is that there have occasionally been really horrible things that happened in the name of religion, even in the name of specifically the God of the Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Christianity, same thing. But here's the thing. The greatest gift that the God of the Hebrew Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob brought the world, even if you don't believe in Jesus Christ, this is still true. The greatest thing that was brought to the world through that was the idea of the universal God. Before that time, there was no such thing as a universal God. There were tribalist gods. There were gods that belonged to this tribe and that tribe. There were gods that belonged in the ocean and on the mountains. And there were gods that looked after certain people but played favorites and didn't like certain people and actually made trouble for other people. And the gods were really more part of the system and forces of nature, that kind of thing. The Hebrew Bible came up with the idea of God originated everything. God created the entire earth, all of the elements, and also created all humans. You see, the God of the Bible is not tribalistic, does not play favorites. There are special covenants he has with some people, but he doesn't love his other children any less. And what Pearl alluded to there with Isaac and Ishmael, that's a perfect example of it. Ishmael is not Jewish. He is not the child of providence. That was Isaac. Isaac was Abraham's true heir. However, you'll notice, even in the Torah, in the sacred writings of the Jews, and if you were trying to create a tribalist God, they did a terrible job, because this story and several others throughout the Old Testament illustrates this. God also looks after Hagar, Ishmael's mother, and Ishmael, even after they're no longer a part of Abraham's family and dwelling with him. even after that part, God is still looking out for them. The Torah and the Old Testament do focus primarily on the Jews, but there are many occasions where the Jews help out other people. And you'll remember that the Jewish Bible, everybody comes from the same person, Adam. And then when the flood came, everybody came from one of Noah's 3 sons. And so, in a very real sense, the Bible brings us together because we have one universal God who loves and cares about all of us and created all of us, and that makes us all brothers and sisters under him. Now, the Jews believe that they have a special covenant still that is still in place. Christians believe that covenant has been taken away now. But regardless of where your belief falls on that, the people that believe in that believe in one single universal God that is over all. That's the difference. That's something that is very, very different than every other major world religion, where gods tend to be tribalist. The Hebrew Bible was the first one to do that, and if you believe that you are the brother of all humanity, that you're just one part of this large family, and that God cares about everybody, you are not likely to do terrible things to other people. Even if you didn't know a word of the Torah, didn't know a word of the New Testament, you would still just kind of have a general feeling, if you believed that you should treat people a certain way. Now, of course, the Bible and the Torah go more in depth than that and explain how to do that and explain the morality that they revolve around. But ultimately, that's the idea that is at the core of both. You treat other people a certain way because they are important to God. And you are important to God, and because of that, and because God wants what's best for them, and also because God wants what's best for you, you operate in a way that reflects that central core idea. That God created us and that he cares about us and he cares about everybody else just as much as he cares about you. The central theme of the gospel is that you love God with all your heart, soul, and mind and love your neighbor as yourself. Those are words directly from the mouth of Jesus Christ. And by the way, those are words that he was quoting from where? The Old Testament. And he said, on this hang all the laws and the prophets. Everything in the Old Testament is contingent upon that. And so Jesus was bringing this all together and saying, if you're looking for what is the greatest commandment, it's that. Love God, take care of each other. Now, there's a whole lot of other stuff that goes with it, but ultimately every single other thing hinges upon that idea because God is a universal God. And that's what Coach Pearl was really grabbing onto and articulating so eloquently. And when you look at the converse of that, since we're talking about Holocaust Remembrance Day, look at Nazism. Remember that the Nazism that took place and reigned terror all over Egypt, that stands for the National Socialist Worker Party. Nationalism is the opposite of that. Nationalism is embedded in racism and tribalism. It's saying that our country is better than other countries, and because of that, we need to be the dominant tribe. That's what nationalism all goes back to. And I understand that people misunderstand this and misuse it, and I'm not attributing everybody that just doesn't get what nationalism is, that everybody that thinks that is necessarily a Nazi. There's good people that I have strong disagreements with on whether or not to use this term, but I'm just telling you the history of it. The history of nationalism is rooted in we have a national identity, and because of that, because we do have that national identity, our national identity is better than everybody else's by sheer merit of it being our national identity. That our tribe is better than every other tribe. That's very different than patriotism. That's very different than exceptionalism. There's nothing wrong with those ideologies, but nationalism delves off into this idea that some people in some nations are just better than others. And that's not something that I think that you can get behind. I think that you can ideologically disagree with some nations and some societies, but at that point you're not disagreeing with the person or the nation or the tribe. You're disagreeing with their ideas, which is perfectly acceptable. Nationalism doesn't do that. And that's one of the big problems that I have with people referring to themselves as nationalists. You look at every nation that went nationalist, it all did so under a secularist doctrine, which goes exactly to what Coach Pearl was talking about there. Because you look at Germany, the Soviet Union, Venezuela, Cuba, they all adopted this radical secularist doctrine before they went over the edge. Why? Because if you believe in the God of the Bible, you believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, those two things just do not mesh. You cannot be nationalistic and believe that you are all God's children. It doesn't work. And so if they want to get to that goal, if they want their nation to be the strongest one that rules over all the others and everything, all the crazy things that Hitler and Stalin and Mao and Mussolini have said, then you have to believe that you are a tribe in competition with every other tribe, and your tribe matters and the others don't. And that is fundamentally incompatible with the ideas taught in Christianity. The two cannot coincide. And that's why they had to jettison religion, specifically the religion that believes in the God of the Bible, from their nation before they could invoke the nationalism that they wanted. Even they understood in their own twisted, evil mind that you can't do that. And that brings me back to Coach Pearl's final point about religious liberty. You see, religious liberty is incredibly instrumental in this, specifically because it is the antidote to that. You remember that at the beginning of this program, I was talking about there were 11 million people, even though only 6 million Jews perished in the concentration camps, there were 11 million that were killed overall. Do you know who else was in the concentration camps, how else they decided? Because obviously, if you're a Jew, you're going in the concentration camp. That's not how it was for all the other people. So what was the metric? How did they decide who they were going to put in there? Well, political opponents, that was one. Communists, because they disagreed with their politics, that was another one. But you know who else was also in there? Christians. People that were preachers, people that believed in the word, people that would not abandon the gospel of Christ, those people were thrown in there. And there were different classifications of that under the Nazi system. You had Catholics that were thrown in. You had just Bible scholars, sort of generically, Bible scholars in general as a broad category were thrown in. And there were other groups too, but the reason that was done, the reason that you were seen as an enemy of the state if you were either Jewish or a religious Christian, all boiled down to your ideology simply could not mesh with the Nationalist Socialist ideology that the Nazis were pushing. And because of that, you were automatically thought of as an enemy. They were right. Not saying they were right to do what they did, but they were right in the sense that their ideology could not survive in an environment where the God of the Bible was taught. They were terrified of that, and that's why they tried to execute anybody that had a God-centered worldview. And so people can talk about religion and the horrible things that it's brought to the world and try to make the case that all the world's woes have come from religion, when the truth is, the vast majority of those woes didn't come from Christians. They came from secular societies when they jettisoned Christianity and Christian teaching from their shores. You see, Nazism was primarily about religious persecution, not racial persecution. There was an aspect of that for sure. They believed that they were going to create a master race, an Aryan race, and they believed that the Jews were racially impure, just like the Gypsies and several other groups, and because of that, they had to be removed as well. That was definitely an aspect of it. But what they're forgetting is that there was a German mysticism that wanted to go back to the old tribalist gods of, kind of the Norse mythology, the German mythology. Norse is a bit of a stretch, but it's the closest thing that I can say that people will know and understand. They wanted to go back to that old, with the Thule Society, and go back into paganistic teachings and grab hold onto secularism. And the idea of the universal God is obviously an anathema to those things. They can't convince people that it's okay for us to kill 11 million other people if you believe those people are your brothers and sisters, that you believe that they were created in God's image just like you were. And that's why they had to get rid of it. So, yes, there was an aspect of racial purification when it came to getting rid of the Jews, but they're forgetting that the primary reason that the Nazis felt like they had to get rid of the Jews was because they believed in God. That was at the core of it. That was the reason that they believed those people have to be gotten rid of, because they believe in God, and that is a problem that will destroy the narrative we are trying to push, that destroys our ideology that some people are just better than others, and we're not all created by God, and we're not all God's children. That's the thing that a lot of historians won't talk about, which brings us to America. Religious liberty is here for all people. Coach Pearl, I believe, is wrong. I believe he's wrong in the belief that the Messiah has not come. I believe that the Messiah did come, and his name was Jesus Christ, and he came to die for Coach Pearl just like he came to die for Caleb Colquitt and everybody else within the sound of my voice. Bruce Pearl doesn't believe that. He thinks the Messiah is still on his way. I disagree with him. He should still be allowed to practice his religion, and I don't have any desire to curtail that, to stop him. He's allowed to say whatever he wants in defense of his religion. He's allowed to worship however he wants, and that doesn't bother me, and that's okay. What he believes, that Jesus wasn't the Messiah, that, if that were true, would destroy everything I believe about my religion. He and I are on opposite sides when it comes to that debate. Doesn't matter, he should still have the right to practice his religion. That's the difference in America and what happened in Germany. And so if you really want to follow this mantra of never again, you do have to learn your history. You have to know what never again actually means. But more importantly, and this is what Coach Pearl was hitting on, if you want to live in a society that never allows that to happen again, religious liberty is instrumental. Thinking of that as a foundational constitutional right, as a human right, that's at the core of all that. Because if we lose that, we get one step closer to being like the Nazis. Same thing is true of freedom of speech. If we're going to say, no, you can't say those things, you're dangerous, we get one step closer to authoritarianism under the National Socialist Worker Party. I'm not saying that that's exactly where we're going to land. I'm just saying that that is a dangerous road to go down because of that. They understood that they could not have religious liberty in a nation if they wanted to build the nation that they wanted to have. And because of that, they removed everybody that disagreed. America has religious liberty enshrined as literally our first right. It's the first one they list in the First Amendment. And it's because the founders understood that that was the single most important of all of our rights. Ultimately, it comes down to that. If you want life, liberty, and property, which is the intended goal, as we learned from the Declaration of Independence, the first way that you ensure that that is going to take place is you say everybody has a right to worship as they see fit, and government will not impede the exercise of that religion. That's what it all goes down to. And so Coach Pearl and everybody else, I appreciate all of the things that you're doing for the university that is my alma mater. But ultimately, what I care more about is that you appreciate the religious liberty that is afforded in this country, because we all love sports. We all love basketball. I love my Tigers. I hope they go to the Final Four or even further again this year. I really do. I would love to see that happen. But what's more important, and the thing that I admire about Coach Pearl the most, is that he understands that what makes America different and what makes Auburn and the state of Alabama different, what is the backstop that tries to make sure that the government never turns into a government like they had under Nazi Germany, is that we respect the religious freedom of other people. Stay the course, friends. Tactics is a production of News Radio 1440 and Cumulus Media Montgomery. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Cumulus Media or our business partners. Graphics by Jessica Dawson. Video production by Jackson Dean. Broadcast studio provided by Faulkner University. Location studio provided by the Dalraida Church of Christ. Copyright